My name is Micah Rowe, and I used to believe family would protect you, especially your own wife. That belief shattered on the night her sister's fiancé, Gavin Holt, assaulted me in my own kitchen. His fist cracked my lip. His boots slammed into my ribs. I lay there, bleeding, tasting copper and betrayal. My wife Delia stood just beyond the fridge door and texted from the next room. "Stay away from my sister." "No, are you okay?" "No, what happened?" Just silence that hit harder than Gavin's fists. I replied, "Done." Everything I thought I knew collapsed in an instant. I remember lifting my head just enough to see Delia's silhouette framed by the doorway, phone in hand, her figure stiff and distant. I thought she would rush to me, her voice trembling as she asked what happened. But she didn't. Instead, she tapped furiously on the screen, each keystroke a dagger twisting in my gut. Her only words, delivered without hesitation or concern, were designed to protect her sister and to abandon me. The betrayal was absolute. Every echo of that night replayed in my mind, each sound amplified by the hollow ache of loss. I realized how deeply I had trusted her, how easily that trust had been weaponized against me. Anger flared then, a burning light in my chest. I forced myself to stand, ignoring the fire searing through my side. Something inside me snapped. No longer would I be the man who swallowed pain for the sake of peace. No longer would I remain silent in the face of betrayal. Picking up my phone with shaking fingers, I scrolled through old messages, a record of every promise Delia and I had made, promises of love, protection, unwavering support. I swiped until I found the contract she had asked me to co-sign a month earlier, the same contract I had believed would secure her sister's future happiness. I opened the mortgage guarantee on my screen and stared at it for a long moment, sunlight from the window catching on the reflection. With my other hand pressed against the fresh bruise forming on my ribs, I tapped, "Withdraw guarantee." My breath hitched as I watched the confirmation pop up. It was silent, almost clinical, a quiet act of rebellion that echoed louder than any scream. I pressed confirm. That single click severed my promise to protect their dream. The weight lifted off my chest even as the physical pain throbbed beneath my shirt. In the weeks that followed, I replayed that moment in my mind like a prayer. I thought about how we tell ourselves that love is enough, that compromise and sacrifice build strong foundations. But sacrifice without reciprocity is nothing but refusal to see yourself as worthy of protection. I realized that Delia had exposed her own limits when she chose silence over solidarity. The floor under my body was as familiar as a confession booth, and I bared my wounds to it. I learned that night that truth could sting, but lies would slowly kill you. As dawn broke the next morning, I sat on the edge of the bathtub and cleaned the blood from my face, using cold water to wash away the sting. I examined the mirror reflection, puffy eyes, split lip, a bruise dark as old coal forming beneath my cheekbone. And beneath those injuries, there was something new, resolve. I would not cower. I would not let my story end there. I would rise, collect evidence, speak truth, and reclaim my life. But first, I would let that silent text play through my mind until I understood its full weight. When I finally left the apartment, I wore a loose shirt to hide the bruises. I carried my phone in one hand and a small bag containing fresh clothes and essentials in the other. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I couldn't stay. The kitchen would forever echo with the sound of boots striking flesh, and Delia's indifferent words would haunt the cupboards and countertops. I locked the door behind me, not looking back. On the pavement outside, the morning air felt crisp and unforgiving. I took a deep breath and tasted freedom for the first time in months. The road ahead was uncertain, but it was mine to walk. And as I stepped away from the apartment, I understood that the floor where I learned the truth was not just a scene of pain. It was the place where my life's second act began. Begin again. A month before the assault, Delia begged me to help her sister Harper and Gavin secure a mortgage for their dream home. I signed as guarantor, because that's what family does, right? But family doesn't leave you in a heap on the floor. That night, I opened the mortgage contract on my phone, breathing through bruised ribs and rage. One click revoked my guarantee. Quiet, legal, devastating. Their house, gone before they ever stepped through the front door. I went to bed still bleeding, but somehow lighter. I woke the next morning to a silence so complete it roared in my ears. My apartment felt different, stripped of obligations I had assumed were eternal. The contract lay open on my bedside table, proof that the power to protect and the power to destroy had always been the same. With deliberate calm, I gathered every paper related to the mortgage guarantee, signed documents, bank correspondence, text messages from Delia. I organized them inside a manila folder, each sheet a bullet point in the story of broken trust and shattered illusion. The weight that had settled over me while I lay in a puddle of blood began to lift. As I sipped my coffee, the burn in my side dulled, and I felt something new bloom inside, clarity. I realized that enabling their dream had been my choice, but relinquishing that promise was an act of responsibility to myself. The moral ledger balanced itself when I clicked Withdraw Guarantee. I didn't need to justify my decision with pleas or explanations. The law had done it for me, and in its cold precision lay a kind of righteousness I had never known. Later that day, I visited the bank's website to confirm the mortgage status. The listing was already flagged as lapsed. No foreclosure notices yet, but the underwriters had closed the file. I printed a confirmation letter for my records and scanned it into a secure cloud folder. Next, I drafted a short email to Derek Shaw, the loan officer, thanking him for his time and notifying him of my decision. I kept the tone neutral, almost cordial. There was no need for vitriol. The outcome spoke for itself. In the early afternoon, Delia called. I let it ring, watching the caller ID blink insistently. I imagined her on the other end, phone clutched to her ear, tears streaking her face as she begged me to reverse what I had done. I wondered what words she could muster when guilt and anger collided in her throat. But I said nothing. When she finally gave up and hung up, I felt neither vindication nor regret, only peace. I was no longer intertwined in their reckless fantasy. Word spread quickly through our mutual friends. Messages poured in. Micah, are you okay? What happened with Delia? I'm so sorry. For the first time, I responded to them personally. I wrote that I was fine, getting medical attention, focusing on healing. But I said nothing about why I had withdrawn my guarantee. I refused to cast myself as either victim or villain. My story was mine to tell, and I would tell it when I was ready. That evening, I called my lawyer, Maureen Keyes, to confirm that no legal repercussions awaited me. She laughed when I explained the situation. You did exactly what any prudent guarantor would, she said. That was your money, your reputation, and ultimately your safety. Her words reinforced the conviction growing inside me. I had acted correctly. Protection without reciprocity was exploitation in disguise, and I was no longer its victim. At home, I sat at my desk and opened a blank document. I began writing an account of every moment leading to that click, the late-night pleas, the reassurances I gave Harper, the quiet pride I felt signing the guarantee, the sudden panic when Gavin said he would pressure the bank to accelerate the application, and finally the moment Delia turned away from me. I wrote until my fingers ached and the document glowed with unfiltered truth. When I finished, I titled it, A Signature Too Far, and saved it to a secure folder. I knew that the collapse of their dream home would be traumatic for Harper and Delia, but I could no longer prioritize their comfort over my safety. The next morning, I would wake without the ache of betrayal pressing down on me. I would wake free of obligations that had been bought with my integrity. And from that freedom, I would build something new, a life untainted by the expectations of those who had refused to care for me. As I closed the laptop, I felt a tremor of something I had forgotten, anticipation. Freed from the weight of a promise twisted into a weapon, I could imagine mornings of my own choosing, afternoons rebuilding confidence rather than their illusions, and evenings without bruises lingering in memory. I envisioned a home that welcomed me wholeheartedly, relationships grounded in respect, and a future shaped by boundaries as much as empathy and deep healing through honesty. That night, I drifted into sleep untroubled, cradled by the knowledge that self-respect is the foundation upon which any lasting dream must stand. 5 minutes after I revoked my guarantee, the first tremors of their world's undoing began. My phone, tucked into the pocket of my hoodie, buzzed with an urgency I'd never welcomed before. Emails from the bank system, each delivering the same fatal verdict: mortgage application withdrawn. Underwriting ceased. I saw the subject lines multiply until they blurred together in a cascade of digital death notices. Simultaneously, Delia's number flashed relentlessly, accompanied by countless texts from Harper and even Gavin himself. I stared at the screen as though it were a foreign language, the messages forming a feverish din. What did you do? Micah, answer me. You'll regret this. Their panic was visceral in every word, but I remained silent. I let the notifications pile up like fallen bricks, each one a testament to a collapse they'd built on someone else's trust. I stood alone in the small entryway of my apartment, phone in hand, as the morning sun slanted through the blinds and carved pale lines across the floor. The air smelled faintly of last night's takeout, nothing extraordinary, nothing daring. And yet it had become the stage for an irreversible transformation. My heartbeat slowed to a measured pace as I absorbed the fact that my single act of withdrawing support had triggered a domino effect. Homes threatened, dreams deferred, all orchestrated by my resolve not to be trampled upon again. The realization filled me with a sober satisfaction. Power, once ceded, could be reclaimed with a clear, decisive action. I opened the group chat with Delia, Harper, and Gavin, their digital war room, only to be greeted by an avalanche of accusations and desperation. I saw Harper's message first: "We're homeless because of you." No mention of the bruises Gavin left on me. No shadow of guilt for his violence. Then Delia, "You ruined everything. Do you understand what this means? Think about us." Finally, Gavin, "You'll pay for this. Mark my words." I scrolled past the avalanche of broken promises and entitled ultimatums as though swiping away clouds. Instead of responding, I pressed the 3 dots in the chat window and clicked Mute Notifications. I watched their messages flood in, but they no longer breached the walls I had erected around my peace. Technology amplified their panic, but I channeled mine into methodical organization. I opened my laptop, creating a new folder labeled Evidence, Mortgage Betrayal. Into it, I dragged screenshots of their messages, the bank's notification emails, and the original guarantee document with my digital signature. I copied the ER discharge summary that listed my injuries from Gavin's assault. I downloaded security camera snapshots from the online portal of my apartment complex, capturing the timestamped moments before and after the attack. Each file became a piece of armor, protecting me from the maelstrom of their demands. I realized that outrage, both theirs and mine, could be harnessed, compartmentalized, and deployed strategically. An hour later, as the sun reached its zenith, I drafted an email to Derek Shaw, the loan officer at the bank. I began with a courteous greeting, acknowledging his efforts to shepherd the application. I explained, in calm, professional terms, that I had exercised my right to withdraw as guarantor due to newly surfaced personal safety concerns. I refrained from detailing Gavin's violence or Delia's indifference. The law did not require embellishment, only clarity. I attached a brief note confirming my identity and my digital signature on the revocation. The email landed like a hammer on a nail. Direct, clean, undeniable. By midday, the residents of my floor found themselves in an unplanned children's chorus. The bank's underwriters, loan officers, and legal team all chimed in via email threads, demanding confirmation, exploring alternatives, and then ultimately conceding defeat. With clinical precision, I responded to each query. This decision is final. No appeals. Their tone shifted from hopeful to resigned. The engineers behind the mortgage machine had no choice but to accept the withdrawal and cancel the loan. In canceling it, they protected the bank's risk profile and, inadvertently, affirmed my decision to protect myself. Late that afternoon, the family drama migrated back to my phone. Delia's number lit up the screen once more. I allowed the call to ring out. Then, her text arrived. "Micah, please. Let's talk. I love you." I resisted the familiar ache in my chest. The one that told me to forgive before being forgiven. Instead, I tapped read and turned my phone face down. The living room felt vast and empty, emptied of expectation and pretense. I sat on the couch, the bruise on my side a dull throb in sync with the bass notes of my favorite playlist streaming quietly. Music filled the spaces where their demands could no longer echo. That evening, I organized my physical space like I did my digital one. I cleared the kitchen table of paperwork, leaving only the neatly filed folder. I wiped down the counters until they gleamed, as though preparing for a new chapter. I boiled water for tea and watched the steam spiral upward, an ephemeral dance free from constraint. As I sipped the warm liquid, I considered their ruin. A family's dream home evaporating because I refused to be complicit in my own erasure. Empathy for their plight flipped into respect for my boundaries. I realized empathy must be reciprocal or it is cruelty in disguise. As night fell, and the city lights flickered on through the window, I drafted a brief statement to the bank's ethics department detailing the assault and Delia's failure to intervene. I attached the ER report, timestamped security footage, and screenshots of her indifferent text, "Stay away from my sister." I clicked send, feeling the finality of my narrative taking shape in official channels. The pulse in my ribs eased. Justice, at least procedural justice, could follow. I knew legal recourse was not a panacea, but it was a start. Before sleep claimed me, I returned to the group chat one last time. I posted a single line. "I have withdrawn my guarantee due to personal safety concerns. I will not engage further." Then I logged out. The collapse I set in motion revealed a fundamental truth. Power surrendered is not power lost. It is power abandoned and often exploited. By reclaiming control, I had forced the structure of their dream to buckle under its own entitlement. I closed my eyes, not to dreams of revenge, but to the realization that waking up tomorrow would not feel like surviving. It would feel like living. The next morning, sunlight slipped through the blinds and thin, accusatory lines across my apartment floor. I'd spent the night cataloging evidence and drafting legal notices, but now reality came pounding at my door. A heavy knock rattled the frame as though it meant to break it down. I rose from my desk, every bruise along my side a reminder of why I had drawn my boundaries so fiercely. Through the peephole, I saw Delia's face, pale, hollowed by sleepless nights, her hair pulled into a sloppy bun that betrayed tears and frustration. Behind her loomed Gavin, arms folded across his chest, fists still clenched as if primed for another assault. Their silhouettes pressed against the frosted glass like vultures circling carrion. I considered opening the door, imagined their words tumbling out in panic and spite, the same chorus I'd read online and in text. "You're ruining everything. Come back. Fix this now." But I refused to pit my wounded spirit against their desperation again. Instead, I leaned back against the wall and watched, heart hammering, as Delia raised her trembling hand and rapped on the door frame. She shouted, voice cracking, "Micah, let me in, please." Her entreaties were raw, stripped of pretense. I felt a sliver of something I once recognized. Compassion? Guilt? But it recoiled under the memory of her silence the night I bled on my kitchen floor. I pressed my ear against the cool wood, allowed her words to wash over me without response, letting the silence answer for me. Gavin shifted his weight from one boot to the other, and I heard him mutter under his breath, loud enough for me to catch, "You think you can do this to us and walk away?" I pictured his jaw tightening, remembered the way his fist had connected with flesh. For a moment, I felt a flicker of fear, an old reflex urging me to step back. But then I recalled the power of my click, the revocation that rippled through underwriter systems, that stripped away the rug beneath their feet. So I pressed my phone screen to silent mode and dialed my lawyer's office with my free hand, just in case. I wouldn't call it backup. I'd call it prudence. Delia's voice rose again, more urgent. "Micah, you have to let me explain." Her explanation would be excuses, shifting blame onto me for not reading the fine print, onto Harper for her own naivety, onto the bank for not doing enough to warn them. I knew every twist of their justifications because they had rehearsed them in group chats and voicemails. I stayed motionless, heart steadying as I chose not to engage. Then I heard Gavin's boot slam against the wood with enough force that the whole door shuddered. A splinter cracked, the frame groaned. I imagined the jagged wood catching on his leather toe, his knuckles bleeding as he pushed through. It was a vivid reminder that physical violence was never far, and that I must maintain the barrier between their rage and my reclaimed life. I pressed my back firmly against the opposite wall, phone at the ready, and let them vent their fury at the locked door. Their words came in shouts and sobs. Delia wept, accusing me of cruelty, of destroying the life she had envisioned for us all. Gavin hissed threats, a low growl of entitlement cut by fear that his own dreams would collapse. The air in the hallway smelled of wet asphalt and stale cigarette smoke from neighbors' balconies. It carried the sounds of the world moving on while their own world teetered on the brink. And in that stillness between their demands, I recognized that I was no longer a hostage to their expectations. My silence was not ignorance, it was a fortress. Eventually, their voices faded into ragged breaths. The door settled back into its frame, the knocks ceased, and only my rapid pulse filled the quiet. I pressed my palm to the cool wood and whispered into it, "I choose me." The words resonated through the grain, anchoring me to a vow I would never again dismiss. In the soft hush that followed, I reached for my phone and opened the Notes app. I typed, "Document incident, attempted entry, threats made." Then I transcribed everything Delia and Gavin had yelled. I saved the file under security log. Each word was a barrier against gaslighting, against the kind of erasure they had tried to impose on me. Later that afternoon, I took a walk to clear my head, bandage fresh beneath my shirt and coat. The city's rhythm pulsed around me, street vendors hawking fry bread, cars crawling past like tired snakes, children's laughter rippling from a playground down the block. I felt the vibration of life beneath my feet, reminding me there were worlds beyond this family's drama. With every step, I reaffirmed my boundaries. No longer would I be summoned by guilt or guilt trips. No longer would I tolerate violence as the currency of family allegiance. The line I drew around my body would extend to my life. Respectful relationships only, empathy grounded in mutual care. By evening, I had drafted a formal letter to Delia, delivered via certified mail. I acknowledged the history we shared, the love I once believed in, and then stated clearly, I cannot subject myself to threats, violence, or indifference. Our relationship ends here. I signed it Micah Rowe without the flourish of our wedding invitations cursive. No tears, no begging. Just a man protecting the fragile sanctum of his own integrity. As I placed the letter in the mailbox, the sun dipped behind the skyline, streaking the horizon with molten gold. I considered how, for so long, I had defined myself by what I did for others. Now I defined myself by what I would no longer allow. The collapse I had initiated in their lives mirrored a rebirth in mine. The knocks on the door had symbolized their last attempt to force me back under their thumb. Their failure was my victory. That night, I returned home to a quiet apartment, its emptiness welcoming rather than threatening. I brewed tea, wrapped a warm scarf around my throat, and sat by the window. The city lights flickered on like distant stars, each one a reminder that even in darkness, light persists. I sipped slowly, feeling the heat seep into my bones. The only knock I expected now was the one curiosity might bring an opportunity for connection that honored my worth. I closed my eyes and breathed in the steady hum of peace, knowing that the fortress of my boundaries would stand against any future assault. Family, I realized, was not the people who broke you. It was the people who remained when you needed them most. And that night, my fortress stood strong. When the dust settled after their failed attempt to break down my door, another kind of assault began, one waged with words and omission rather than fists. I expected apologies from Delia or Harper, even if only grudging admissions of guilt. I expected them to ask if I was okay, to offer bandages, ice packs, anything to acknowledge the harm done. Instead, I was met with a wall of silence that reverberated louder than any accusation. They didn't come around to check on my bruises, or even to demand I collect my things. They simply cut me out of their lives as cleanly as I had cut them out of mine. The first sign came 2 days later, when I received a group text notification on my phone from Family Chat. My heart skipped, hope blooming briefly before I remembered they no longer considered me family. I unlocked the screen, expecting pleas and perhaps the patriarchy's last gasp of guilt. Micah, please, we love you. Come back. But there was nothing, no text in the thread, not even an automated message. The group had vanished, erased. The silence was a statement. You do not exist here anymore. I sat on my couch, the faint hum of the air conditioner filling the sudden vacuum. I thought of all the group messages I had once sent, birthday wishes, photos of our dog, plans for weekend dinners, and how those trivial exchanges had sustained a network of intimacy. Now every message I sent bounced back unanswered. Every call went straight to voicemail. In their silence, they wielded a weapon more precise than any boot. Erasure. The most devastating violence is not what you feel on the floor, but what you feel in empty inboxes and unanswered voicemails. Instead of reaching out again, I let their silence settle around me. I refused to send the frantic, "Why won't you talk to me?" text that would have begged for attention. I refused to leave another voicemail that ended in me pleading to be heard. Because pleading is a confession of dependency. It would concede the truth they sought to bury, that I mattered. Silence, I realized, could protect me more effectively than any retort. By refusing to engage, I reclaimed the power they attempted to strip away. I redirected my energy into documentation, a habit born of necessity, but refined into strategy. I opened a new folder on my laptop titled Communications Log. Into it went every call attempt, every voicemail transcript, every unanswered text. I included timestamps and delivery receipts, constructing an undeniable record of their deliberate erasure. If they wanted to paint me as the villain, they would have to fabricate evidence of my aggression, but I had a folder full of proofs that I had simply communicated and was ignored. In their refusal to respond, they provided the proof of my restraint. The next morning, I visited a local copy shop to print out the log, then had it bound in a simple black folder. I wrote my name on the cover, Micah Rowe Communications Log. As I walked home under the gray sky, the folder under my arm felt like both shield and sword. If they chose silence, I would wield evidence. If they chose lies, I would expose them. I felt the weight of the folder as a tangible reminder that boundaries could be reinforced with records as well as words. Back at my apartment, I made coffee and sat at the kitchen table where so much of my life's upheaval had played out. I spread the log before me, sliding each printed page across the surface like playing cards in a high-stakes game. My ribs throbbed faintly, a whisper of the physical trauma Gavin inflicted, but my mind was acutely aware that this ritual was its own form of healing. By documenting silence, I rendered it visible. I rendered it powerless. Later that afternoon, I drafted a concise letter addressed to Delia, Harper, and Gavin, sent via certified mail, so I could prove delivery. I began. Despite my attempts to communicate, I have received no response. I outlined the dates and times of calls and texts, then stated, "Your refusal to engage constitutes a deliberate and harmful act of emotional violence. I will not be silenced. I reserve the right to pursue all legal remedies to protect my well-being." I printed the letter on crisp white stationery, folded it neatly, and sealed it in an envelope marked personal and confidential. I walked to the post office, slipped it into the mailbox, and watched it disappear into the sorting chute. In that moment, my silence was no longer passive. It had become a statement. The following days were devoid of their usual pang of expectation when my phone buzzed. I grew accustomed instead to the quiet hum of my own life, the soft clink of dishes as I washed them, the muted roar of news on the living room TV, the rhythmic tapping of rain against the window pane. I reveled in the absence of arguing voices and the flutter of angry emojis. Their silence offered me space to breathe, to think, to plan. I kept returning to my communication log, adding new rows whenever I tried, and failed to reach them. Watching it grow was strangely soothing. One evening, I received an unexpected email from Derek Shaw, the bank loan officer. He wrote, "Mr. Rowe, I apologize for the distress this process has caused. Please let me know if there is any further documentation you need from me." I smiled reading his courteous tone, a reminder that not all silence holds malice. Some results from silence simply give voice to fairness. I replied with a thank you note and attached relevant pages from my log, including the certified mail receipt from my letter. Then I set the laptop aside and leaned back, satisfied that the log had served its purpose. As autumn approached, a golden light filtered through the window panes, and I moved my folder to a shelf in my study alongside medical reports and legal filings. I looked at it often, not out of bitterness, but as proof of my decision to refuse the role of victim. I had faced violence, betrayal, and erasure, and emerged stronger. Silence had been a weapon wielded against me, and I had turned it into a shield. In the solitude of my apartment that night, I reflected on the transformation I had undergone. The man who once signed guarantees at a family member's request had become someone who meticulously documented every instance of harm. Silence had taught me that absence could carry meaning, that being ignored could be a catalyst for action. I closed my eyes and felt a profound calm settle in my chest, deeper than any fear, stronger than any hate. Family, I realized, is not defined by shared blood or shared addresses. Family is defined by the willingness to stand by you when you bleed, and the refusal to hide in silence when you scream for help. They chose silence. I chose record-keeping. They erased me. I documented them. In that choice, I discovered my own voice. And with that voice, I reclaimed not only my safety but my self-respect, and that was a victory no silence could ever steal. That Sunday morning began like any other, with pale light filtering through my blinds and the dull ache in my ribs reminding me of the violence that had set everything in motion. I sipped bitter black coffee and scrolled through emails one hand at a time, grateful for the simple act of holding my mug without flinching. Then there was a knock, 3 sharp raps that sounded oddly ceremonial against the door. I glanced at my phone. 2 missed calls from the local precinct. My heart lurched. When I opened the door, Officer Ramirez stood there, uniform crisp, expression wary as he extended a folded piece of paper toward me. "Mr. Rowe, you've been served." In his hand was a court document, a temporary restraining order filed by Gavin Holt, claiming I'd threatened him and Delia. The irony hit me like a punch harder than any boot. The man who had battered me on my kitchen floor now alleged I was the aggressor. I took the paper with calm precision and saw the judge's name at the top. My pulse pounded, but my resolve did not waver. I thanked Officer Ramirez quietly and watched him leave, then closed the door and slid down to the floor, breathing through the cold rush of adrenaline. This was a new chapter in their campaign, a legal erasure meant to paint me as the villain. But I refused to let their lies stand unchallenged. I carried the restraining order to my desk and set it beside the thick stack of documentation I'd amassed. Hospital records, security footage, photos of bruises, the communication log. Each file felt heavier now, but I took solace in the knowledge that truth carries weight. I opened my laptop and composed an email to Maureen Keyes, my lawyer. I described the situation succinctly. Gavin Holt has filed a TRO claiming I threatened him. We have evidence of his assault on me and Delia's indifference. I attached scanned copies of my evidence bundle and asked for an emergency meeting. Within the hour, Maureen called, her voice cool and reassuring. "They picked the wrong man to back into a corner," she said. She laid out the plan, challenged the TRO with evidence of assault, moved to have it dismissed immediately, and file counterclaims for damages. She warned me that legal battles are draining, but assured me she would fight with precision. I felt a surge of gratitude and steely determination. My life had become a courtroom drama, but I would not be a victim or a footnote. By midday, I found myself sitting on my couch, the order open on my lap, inhaling and exhaling methodically as I reviewed every clause. They sought to restrict me from any contact with Gavin and Delia, contact that I had long since terminated. The irony was sharp enough to taste. I drafted my own affidavit, recounting the assault in vivid detail, the swing of his fist, the crack of bone against bone, Delia's silence as I lay bleeding on my kitchen floor. I described how I revoked the mortgage guarantee to protect my own well-being, and how their campaign of threats and erasure had followed. Each word burned on the screen, a declaration that I would not be intimidated. I printed and signed it in blue ink, then scanned it back into a PDF and sent it to Maureen. She confirmed receipt and said she would file it within the hour. While we waited for the court clerk's confirmation, I turned my attention to another front, public perception. Mutual acquaintances on social media had begun resharing embellished accounts of the family tragedy, portraying me as the villain who torpedoed a young couple's dream. I opened my own account and drafted a brief statement. In light of recent false allegations, I welcome a full hearing to present evidence of the assault against me and my revocation of the guarantee. Truth deserves a fair forum. I posted it with careful neutrality. Neither rage nor pleading, just an invitation to see the facts. Almost immediately, supportive messages trickled in from friends who had witnessed snippets of the drama or knew me personally. Their words, sincere and steady, reminded me that alliances built on truth are stronger than alliances built on violence. I felt less alone. That evening, Maureen and I met via video call. She walked me through the court date. First thing Tuesday, judge's chambers, evidence packet in hand. She coached me on how to present my case, how to keep my emotions in check, how to anticipate Gavin's lawyers' arguments. "They'll try to paint you as unstable," she warned. "Stay calm, stick to the facts." I nodded along, imagining myself in that courtroom, chest no longer aching from bruises but standing firm from integrity. When the call ended, I closed my eyes and visualized the hearing room, the judge behind his bench, rows of seated family members, Gavin trembling as our truth unfolded. I pictured myself speaking clearly, our evidence laid out like armor, my lawyer guiding each disclosure. I felt a thrill of readiness, battle fatigue replaced by focused resolve. On Monday, I gathered one last time with my evidence folder. I checked my phone for the court reminder. Appointment confirmed at 9 a.m. on July 15, 2025. I set 2 alarms and laid out a crisp shirt for the next morning. Then, a rare moment of calm descended. I sat on the edge of my bed and ran my fingers over the scar near my eyebrow, silent testimony of Gavin's violence. This battle was about more than legal technicalities. It was about taking back my narrative. With each file, each affidavit, each witness statement, I was flipping the script they had written for me. No longer would I be the silenced victim cowering behind a door. I would be the man who refused to be erased. That night, before sleep claimed me, I made one final entry in my digital journal. Tomorrow, truth has teeth. I turned off my lamp and lay still, feeling the weight of anticipation settle like a promise. In the quiet darkness, I realized that the real transformation was not the defeating of falsehoods or the dismantling of their allegations. It was reclaiming my agency, proving that violence and silence are weapons that can be disarmed by determined truth. When dawn came, I would face the judge with evidence in hand and integrity in my heart. I would speak, and they would hear. The morning of the hearing dawned crisp and clear, the kind of July day in Lagos that carries humidity in its bones but promises brightness nonetheless. I arrived at the courthouse just before 9, my evidence folder tucked under one arm and a thin layer of resolve coating my nerves. The building loomed ahead. A monolith of authority, its glass doors reflecting both the sky and my reflection, reminding me that today I would face my accusers and the arbiter of our dispute. As I stepped inside, a hush settled over the marble foyer, broken only by distant footsteps and the soft clack of briefcases. I paused at a water cooler to steady my breathing, the echo of trauma memories quieted by the company of determined purpose. This was more than a legal proceeding. It was a reckoning of truth against violence and betrayal. My lawyer, Maureen, met me in the hallway outside courtroom 3B. She wore her usual black pantsuit, sharp lines, no-nonsense attitude, and offered me a reassuring nod. "Ready?" she asked quietly. I swallowed and returned her nod, feeling the weight of her confidence bolster my own. With measured steps, we entered the courtroom together. The walls were paneled in dark wood that absorbed the light, making the space feel serious and final. Rows of benches stretched back, and a few curious onlookers sat tiptoeing at the edges of their seats. I spotted Derek Shaw, the bank officer, in a crisp shirt and tie, offering me a brief, encouraging smile. His presence reminded me that not all who wield authority would twist it against me. Judge Adewale presided, her silver hair pulled into a tight bun, her eyes sharp behind thin glasses. When she called the case, her voice was steady, Mr. Holt versus Mr. Rowe. On the allegation of threats and the requested restraining order, Gavin's lawyer, a slender man with an over-polished suit, stood and delivered a concise opening. "Your Honor, we contend that Mr. Rowe's actions, text messages and verbal statements, constitute a credible threat against Mr. Holt's safety. We request the temporary restraining order stand while further investigations proceed." His words were practiced, clinical, designed to mask any sympathy for the man who had attacked me. Maureen rose, smoothing her skirt before addressing the bench. "Your Honor, my client has documented evidence of an unprovoked assault by Mr. Holt upon Mr. Rowe, resulting in injuries confirmed through medical records. Additionally, Mr. Rowe's decision to withdraw his mortgage guarantee was exercised under legal rights, not a threat. We ask that the restraining order be dismissed immediately, and that the court consider our counterclaims for assault and intentional infliction of emotional distress." Her voice carried clarity and force, leaving no ambiguity about our stance. As she spoke, I watched the judge's expression tighten with interest, an encouraging sign that reason would lead over rhetoric. Next, the evidence unfolded like a careful tapestry. Maureen organized the exhibits. Exhibit A, the ER discharge summary detailing facial lacerations and broken ribs. Exhibit B, a timeline of text messages, including Delia's own dispatch ordering me to stay away. Exhibit C, security camera still showing Gavin's raised fist and Delia's stationary silhouette. Exhibit D, the communication log demonstrating my consistent, unreciprocated attempts to resolve conflict. Each piece was met with nods as it slid onto the judge's desk, a testament to our preparation. The hush in the courtroom deepened until only the soft rustle of paper punctuated the air. When the time came for my testimony, my mouth felt dry, but the memory of pain grounded me. I recounted the assault with measured honesty, how Gavin had swung at me without warning, how I tasted blood and betrayal in the same mouthful. I described Delia's silence, standing mere feet away and opting to text her sister rather than intervene. I spoke of my bruises, my hospital visit, and the cold precision of revoking the guarantee on my phone. The lawyer for the defense attempted to interrupt, questioning my motives, hinting that I sought revenge and financial harm. But Judge Adewale maintained order. She asked for clarification on every point, ensuring that I was heard without distortion. After I stepped down, it was Gavin's turn. He shifted in his seat as his lawyer prompted him to claim fear of retaliation. He spoke of aggressive language and menacing texts, though none were shown as evidence. His narrative felt hollow against the hard facts laid before the court. The contrast was stark, one man battered and betrayed, reduced to a silent figure on the floor, versus another painting himself as victim of mere words. When his testimony concluded, the judge allowed Maureen to cross-examine. She did so with precision, highlighting inconsistencies in his timeline, the absence of any corroborating witnesses, and the fact that Delia herself never filed a complaint on his behalf. The courtroom air seemed to shift as she spoke, the scales tilting toward truth. In the final moments, Maureen summarized our position succinctly. Your Honor, the evidence demonstrates that Mr. Holt is the aggressor, that Mr. Rowe acted within his legal rights for self-protection, and that the sought restraining order lacks merit. We ask for its dismissal and the initiation of appropriate charges against Mr. Holt for assault. Judge Adewale closed the case with a thoughtful pause, reviewing her notes. For what felt like an eternity, I sat in silence, the echoes of previous night's pain lingering like a distant storm. Then, with the weight of authority, she pronounced, "The court finds insufficient evidence to support the issuance of a restraining order against Mr. Rowe. The temporary order is hereby vacated. Furthermore, the assault evidence will be forwarded to the appropriate prosecutorial office for review." Her gavel struck once, the crack resonating through the room like a bell-tolling finality. Relief washed over me in waves, mingled with a quiet triumph. I gathered my things, exchanging a nod with Maureen and a respectful bow to the judge. Outside the courtroom, Derek Shaw offered a hearty handshake. I felt lighter than I had in months. Walking into the sunlight afterward, I realized that the courtroom had not only been a venue for legal battle but a crucible for transformation. I had reclaimed my narrative, forced truth to confront lies, and witnessed justice administered when evidence outweighed entitlement. The scars on my body and the records in my folder now stood as undeniable proof that violence would not secure impunity. As I stepped into the bustling street, I carried with me a sense of victory deeper than any relief, the knowledge that truth, when wielded with precision, has teeth sharp enough to bite through betrayal and set a man free. The day the mortgage officially died, I woke before sunrise, the sky still an inky canvas freckled with stars. I brewed coffee stronger than usual, the sharp aroma cutting through the haze of leftover adrenaline from the courtroom victory. As I sipped, I opened my laptop and navigated to the real estate listing for Harper and Gavin's condemned dream home. Their photos remained gleaming hardwood floors, sunlight streaming through bay windows, a kitchen island fit for a celebration. But the status had changed. Available, price reduced. The description touted unlimited potential, but for me it was an epitaph. I watched the images rotate on my screen and felt a quiet satisfaction in witnessing their dream unravel pixel by pixel. I took a screenshot for the evidence folder, another chapter in the record of their collapse, and then minimized the browser. Their promises had been built on the shaky foundation of my goodwill. Now the contract lay in ruins, and they faced the ugly light of reality without my safety net. Later that morning, the group chat notification lit up my phone. Harper's name floated at the top, twice as large as usual, an angry red bubble showing 12 unread messages. My thumb hovered over the icon before I remembered the power of distance. I ignored it. She wouldn't apologize for Gavin's violence, nor for Delia's betrayal. She only cared about the empty house that stood as a monument to her mistake. I deleted the notification with a swipe, feeling the familiar click of freedom. Then I tapped my own messaging app and typed a short note to my sister, Leah, sharing my relief and letting her know I was okay. Within minutes, I received her encouraging reply. 3 simple words. Proud of you. Genuine. No strings attached. It was the kind of family bond one genuinely craved. That afternoon, I decided to walk by the empty house in person. The neighborhood lay on the outskirts of Lagos, where manicured lawns met dirt roads, and a sense of community lingered like a welcome breeze. I parked a block away and strolled up the driveway, peering through the front windows at the dusty floors and unmade beds. Everything was frozen in mid-construction. The painter's tape still clinging to walls, boxes half unpacked, a chandelier dangling without bulbs. It was a house that had never felt like a home, a vessel for hopes too fragile to withstand reality. A stray dog sniffed at the entrance as I approached, its ribcage visible beneath scruffy fur. I crouched down, reached out my hand, and it licked it tentatively before scuttling away. Even the dog seemed relieved that no one lived there anymore. As I circled the perimeter, I noticed a small padlocked gate at the side, secured with a bright yellow tag indicating foreclosure pending. The tag's edges curled in the humid air, its print bold, Company XYZ Bank. I ran my fingers over the letters, recalling how Derek Shaw, my unlikely ally, had shown compassion once the legal dust settled. I took a photo and texted it to him with a brief note, confirmed listing status. Thank you for your professionalism. His quick reply, anytime, Mr. Rowe, felt almost like an apology for the system he represented. Not everyone in that world had chosen violence over compassion. That evening, I returned to my apartment and found an envelope slipped under my door. The handwriting was unmistakable, Delia's elegant script. My chest tightened as I picked it up. Inside lay a single sheet of lined paper, folded twice. Unfolding it, I read, Micah, I am so sorry. I thought I was protecting my family by protecting Harper. I never imagined what Gavin would do. Please forgive me. I miss you. No postscript, no date. Just her words, raw and personal. I held the letter at arm's length, imagining her alone in her own apartment, pacing the floor, wrestling with guilt. She had finally acknowledged the breach in our relationship, though too late for reconciliation perhaps. I slipped the note into a drawer labeled Correspondence, alongside her previous pleas and Harper's last tirade. Each message cataloged my journey away from their toxicity, a timeline of my own growing self-worth. That night, I sat at my dining table, the lights dimmed to a soft glow, and poured myself a single glass of red wine, something I rarely indulged in. The deep color and tannic bite felt celebratory. I savored a sip and closed my eyes, letting the warmth spread through me. The world outside my window was alive with distant traffic, laughter from neighbors on their balconies, the hum of life moving forward. I raised my glass in a silent toast, to solitude, to resilience, to the man who refused to be collateral damage in someone else's dream. As I set the glass down, my gaze fell on the framed photo of Leah and me at our parents' home, smiles wide, arms around each other, the promise of mutual support shining in our eyes. I walked over, touched the frame, and whispered, "Thank you." No more illusions that family meant blood ties. My family was the one that showed up when I needed them, not the one that abandoned or assaulted me. My ribs might have healed, but the real healing had been learning to choose the people who lifted me rather than those who trampled my dignity. In the days that followed, the house went through open inspections, contract cancellations, price drops. I kept an eye on the listing, noting each change like a historian tracking an empire's fall. But I also watched my own life expand. I enrolled in a weekend martial arts class, not to learn violence, but to reclaim my body's strength and confidence. I started volunteering at a local men's support group, sharing my story and hearing others. Their gratitude reminded me that survival becomes purpose when your pain helps someone else feel less alone. One Sunday, I received an email from Derek. New potential buyers inquiring. Mortgage files officially closed. Beneath it, a single line, all the best. I replied to fresh starts. And in that exchange, I felt the full arc of my journey, from guarantor who lost himself and others' dreams to architect of my own future. The house, once an emblem of betrayal, had become an object lesson. Dreams require foundations more solid than blind sacrifice. They need authenticity, respect, and a willingness to stand by you when the storms come. That evening, I walked past the empty house one more time. The sun had dipped low, casting long shadows across the lawn. I pressed my palm against the cool metal of the padlocked gate and offered a silent benediction. May you find owners who understand home is more than walls and roofs. May your brick and mortar cradle respect and love, not negligence and violence. Then I turned away and walked down the street, head held high, footsteps echoing my certainty. Empty dreams lead to empty houses, but a full life begins when you guard your worth above all else. Months passed, and the physical reminders of that night, the fading purple bruise along my ribs, the jagged scar on my lip, became badges of survival rather than symbols of defeat. I began each morning with stretching exercises to restore mobility to muscles stiffened by pain, reminding myself that healing is active work. In the mirror, I counted the scars not as imperfections, but as evidence that I had endured and overcome. When I caught my reflection and saw the man who once lay helpless on his kitchen floor, I nodded in quiet acknowledgement. I would never forget what happened, but I would never let it define me. I joined a local support group for men who had experienced abuse, finding solidarity in shared stories that mirrored my own isolation and betrayal. On Tuesday evenings, we gathered in a sunlit community center room, chairs arranged in a circle, tea and biscuits at the center as soft invitations to vulnerability. I learned to speak about my assault without anger coding every word, just calm facts delivered with the precision I had used in court. Others nodded as I spoke, their faces etched with empathy and relief that they were not alone. By the end of each meeting, I felt lighter, buoyed by the collective decision to refuse silence. Outside those structured sessions, I began volunteering as a peer counselor, offering guidance to newcomers who trembled at the prospect of sharing their truth. I listened to the man whose partner belittled him in front of friends, to the son whose father dismissed his bruises as accidents, and to the husband whose wife threatened him with isolation if he spoke up. In every story, I recognized echoes of my own trauma, and I used my experience as a roadmap for recovery. Guiding someone from hopelessness to agency reminded me daily that scars can be guides, not shackles. Letters from Delia continued to arrive, some pleading, some remorseful, and one noting that Gavin had disappeared from her life as swiftly as he had entered mine. I filed each letter in the drawer marked correspondence, but I never reread them. Each scrap of paper represented another attempt to reinsert me into a narrative they preferred to rewrite without consequence. Instead, I drafted a final letter of my own, a short, respectful note acknowledging Delia's apology but explaining that our paths had irrevocably diverged. I saved it as a draft and never sent it, knowing closure need not be pronounced to be real. With the spring equinox, I signed up for a marathon, an audacious goal that once would have felt impossible. Training through Lagos's humid mornings and dusty evenings, I discovered that endurance runs on more than physical strength. It requires mental grit forged in adversity. Each mile logged on my running app felt like reclaiming territory they tried to seize. When I crossed the finish line weeks later, legs trembling, breath ragged but triumphant, I wept with relief, overwhelmed by the proof that my body and spirit could be strong again. I also found my voice through writing. I started a blog on male abuse survivorhood, chronicling my journey and offering practical advice on boundary setting, self-care, and legal advocacy. Subscribers from around Nigeria and beyond sent messages of gratitude, detailing how my narrative gave them courage to seek help. One reader wrote, "Your words carved a path through my shame." Reading that, I realized my silence had become someone else's dead end. My voice could light their way. Scarred though I was no longer silent. Now, as I sit at my desk, sunlight warming my arms, evidence folders neatly arranged at my side, I reflect on how far I've come. I am neither helpless victim nor unbroken warrior. I am a man who has learned that true strength lies in embracing vulnerability and refusing to be erased. My scars remain, reminders of past violence, but they pulse with the promise that every wound can heal if tended with honesty and resolve. I speak my truth, not to reopen old wounds, but to ensure others know they matter. In breaking my silence, I found my power, and in sharing it, I help others reclaim theirs. 1 year after that night of violence and betrayal, I stand on the balcony of my new apartment, watching Lagos hum beneath me. The skyline glitters like a field of fireflies, each light a reminder that life pulses forward even after darkness. I cradle a steaming mug of tea in my hands and feel the warmth seep into my palms. A small ritual of self-care I once ignored. In the distance, I see Delia walking past the neighboring building, pausing as if to glance my way. Our eyes meet for a fraction of a second before she turns away. It would have shattered me once, craving her forgiveness. Now, I feel only calm. I chose myself over her betrayal, and that choice endures. My phone buzzes with a message from Leah. "Brunch tomorrow?" I smile, tapping back. Absolutely. My sister has been my anchor. Showing up unasked, offering a bed when I needed rest, and never flinching at the sight of my scars. Our bond was always strong, but adversity cemented it. Family, I learned, is not defined by shared blood alone, but by unwavering presence. Leah is my family in every sense that matters. Inside, the apartment is quiet except for the soft ticking of a clock I rescued from a flea market. Its steady rhythm reminds me that time heals when you give it agency. I move to my desk and gaze at the shelf lined with mementos, the bound evidence folders now neatly archived, the marathon medal hanging from a ribbon, a framed note from a support group member who wrote, "Because of you, I found my voice." Each object charts a journey from victimhood to advocacy, from silence to strength. My work as a peer counselor and blogger has grown into more than volunteer hours. It has become my purpose. I recently partnered with a local nonprofit to develop workshops on abuse recognition and boundary setting for men and women alike. Tomorrow, I'll lead a session on silent wounds, drawing on my own story to guide others through recognizing and articulating emotional violence. I feel the familiar churn of nerves, tempered by the knowledge that sharing truth can ignite healing. When I speak, I will speak not for vengeance but for compassion, because loyalty earned is loyalty freely given. A knock at the door interrupts my reflection. I open it to find two parcels, one from the nonprofit, a thank you plaque for my contributions, and another small box from an old friend. Inside the box is a handcrafted journal embossed with my name. I trace the leather cover with my thumb, surprised by the gesture. A note reads, "For your next chapter, may every page be written in courage." I close the box and inhale deeply, feeling gratitude bloom. Each chapter of my life has been written through hard-earned lessons. Now I hold the pen with confidence. Later, I prepare dinner and set 2 plates, even though I plan to dine alone. Habit, perhaps, or hope that someone might join me. The aroma of sautéed vegetables and grilled fish fills the kitchen, and I pause to savor it, remembering how even simple pleasures once escaped me. I pour a glass of water and sit at the table, the extra plate a silent testament to openness. An invitation to possibility without expectation. As I eat, my thoughts drift to the past year's wounds, Gavin's brutality, Delia's betrayal, the cold corridors of the courthouse. Each trial taught me boundaries, advocacy, and self-respect. I realized that loyalty must be earned through consistent care, honesty, and presence. Those who abandoned me showed me what I would no longer tolerate. Those who stayed, Leah, Maureen, Derek, the support group, demonstrated what true allegiance looks like. I raise my glass in a quiet toast to those who honored me and to the man I became by choosing loyalty to myself. Night falls, and I step back onto the balcony, the city lights now mirrored by stars overhead. The air carries a gentle breeze that whispers possibilities. I close my eyes and breathe in deeply, feeling both the scars of the past and the strength they bestowed. The floor where I learned the truth, the courtroom where I reclaimed my voice, the empty house that taught me boundaries. All these places led me here, standing alone yet never lonely, anchored by loyalty earned and self-respect reclaimed. The future beckons, unwritten but no longer frightening. I clutch the journal and step back inside, ready to fill its pages with stories of resilience, compassion, and unwavering authenticity. In choosing myself, I discovered that the truest loyalty is the one we grant our own worth, and that, above all, is a bond that lasts.